Hi, I'm Ernie Zor, and this is another in our series of Puritas Spring Software's FAQ videos. This one's about the new child support worksheets and how the new worksheets differ from the old ones. Incidentally, I'll be using a pre-release version of the 2019 child support application, so don't be confused if your screens don't look exactly like what you see here. Let's start with the income section. That's lines 1 through 8. I'll scroll them into view here. I don't think it's changed much. The lines of the old and new worksheets are essentially the same, although they're numbered slightly differently because overtime, commissions, and bonuses now has its own line number. And while we're on the subject of overtime, note that the reasonable expectation criterion is still applicable. In other words, commissions, overtime, and bonuses are normally calculated by taking the lesser of the 3-year average or the last year. However, if a lesser amount is reasonably expected, you can use the reasonably expected amount. Typical example is where an employee receives notice from their employer that there will be no more overtime in the upcoming year, possibly for the foreseeable future. In that circumstance, it wouldn't make sense to include any overtime as income. The old worksheet stated that expressly, and although the new ones don't, it still applies, and if you need a cite to that, it's in section 3119.01B13. By the way, the Ohio Department of Job and Family Services now publishes a manual to accompany the worksheets, and that in itself is new. I don't believe there was a manual for the old worksheets. At least if there was, I wasn't aware that there was one. And that brings us to the next section, adjustments to income, which is lines 9 through 13. And I will scroll those into view. There we go. Adjustments to income are handled a bit differently. The first difference is with respect to other children. Now that's children who are children of only one of the parents. In the old worksheets, a parent received an adjustment equal to the federal dependency exemption less any support received for that child. In the new worksheets, instead of using the federal dependency exemption, the new worksheets use the child support table amount for all children, all meaning children of this order and other children. Now, that annual support amount is then divided by the number of all children. This yields a per child amount that is multiplied by the number of other children, and that's the amount of the adjustment. Actually, as complicated as it sounds or may sound, I think it makes more sense to calculate the adjustment that way. Another significant change in the adjustment section is that there is no adjustment allowed for child support paid for other children like there was on line 9 of the old worksheet. I don't have any data as to how this affects the ultimate calculation of child support. However, at the end of this 2-part video, I will have some interesting comparisons of old versus the new worksheets. The next unique thing about the adjustment section is that the health insurance premium section has been moved from being a credit against your support obligation to being an adjustment to income. In this context, I think of the tax accounting maxim that says it's almost always better to take a dollar for dollar credit than it is to take a deduction against income. I'm thinking that that applies here and that the advantage is to the obligee. So I guess I was a bit surprised when we did our old versus new comparison, as you'll see. Spousal support is deductible as an adjustment to income. Now don't be confused by the new tax law that provides that spousal support is no longer includable in income to the recipient or deductible to the payor. For purposes of calculating child support, it's deductible. The question is spousal support income to the recipient? The answer is yes. It is specifically referred to in the income definition. That's section 3119.01C12 and goes on line 6 as other income. I have one last observation about adjustments. You'll note that the definition of income provides that income taxes were specifically excluded from the exclusions and therefore are not allowed as a deduction against income. Consistent with that, we see the old line 11 adjustment for local taxes is now gone. The next section is the income shares section. That's lines 14 through 17. I just scroll them up there so you can see them. Essentially, it's like line 16 of the old worksheet where you divide each parent's income by the party's combined income to figure out what each parent's percentage share of the income is. What's new is the determination of whether the party's combined gross income falls within the shaded portion of the child support table. The shaded portion marks the combined income as being on the low income side of the child support table, and I think it may roughly correspond to the federal poverty level in the old worksheet. At any rate, it affects two aspects of the child support calculation. First, if the combined gross income falls within the shaded area of the table, it changes the way you calculate support when a family has 7 or more children. I don't happen to have the table handy to show you, but there's a shaded portion, which is what's being referred to here. I'll get to that in part 2 of this video. Second, being in the shaded portion also affects the calculation of the child care adjustment, which I'll also cover in part 2 of this video. And that brings part 1 of this 2-part video to a close. I want to personally thank you for visiting Puritas Spring Software's YouTube channel and viewing this video. Be sure to watch part 2, which picks up where I left off and continues with the last half of the new child support worksheet. I hope you visit us again soon. Until you do, I wish you all the best and take care.